Every morning I wake up at 5 o'clock, even though I no longer have to rush to work. The habit, developed over 50 years, does not let go. At 74, I still feel responsible for the company I built from the ground up. Hatton Labs is my life, my legacy. I try to convince myself that I'll soon be able to truly rest, but I know it's a lie. Today, the house feels especially empty. A three-story mansion in a quiet neighborhood in South Charleston is too much space for a lonely old man. When Octavia was alive, these rooms were filled with her laughter, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the sound of classical music. Now it's just me and my thoughts. 3 years have passed, and I still talk to her in the mornings while pouring my coffee. Do you think it's too early for whiskey, Octi? I ask the void, and I think I hear her disapproving cluck somewhere in the back of the house. Our marriage has lasted 46 years. People often ask, what is the secret to such longevity of the relationship? My answer is always the same. She forgave me what I could not forgive myself. Octavia saw through me, knew all my weaknesses and ambitions, but still stayed close to me. She died of pancreatic cancer, just like her father, an agonizing, quick disease that took her in 3 months. On the living room wall hangs our last picture together, us on Lake Michigan, her in a straw hat that I thought was ridiculous, but that she adored. Right now, I would give anything to see her in that hat again. After breakfast, I go to my office. Everything here is as it was. An old oak desk, a leather chair worn from time, bookshelves filled with specialized literature on the manufacture of laboratory equipment. In the corner stands a model of our first mass spectrometer, the instrument that made Hatton Labs the market leader in the 90s. I pull a photo album out of my desk drawer. I flip through the pages: our wedding, Callum's birth, the company's first office, the opening of the new factory, Callum's graduation, my only son, my greatest pride and disappointment at the same time. Our relationship with Callum was always complicated. He grew up a withdrawn, sensitive boy, the exact opposite of me. I wanted him to be strong, determined, ready to take on the family business. Octavia always protected him from my excessive expectations. Ambrose, not everyone has to be like you, she said. Let the boy find his own way. But I wouldn't listen. I insisted. I pressed. I demanded. Callum went to business school even though he was drawn to art. He worked for a company even though he dreamed of traveling. He married the right girl, though his heart belonged to another. When he turned 35, he finally rebelled. Loudly, painfully. We had an argument right in the office in front of the staff. He yelled that I had ruined his life, that he hated the company and me along with it. I replied that he was an ungrateful child, unable to appreciate what had been done for him. He left, slamming the door. We didn't speak for 2 years. Then Octavia's death happened, and he came back for the funeral. We both cried at her grave, but the wall between us never went away. A year later, Callum was killed in a car accident. A drunk driver hit his car at an intersection. Instant death, the doctor said. He didn't suffer. As if that would make me feel better. At the funeral, I stood looking at his casket and felt something inside finally break. Standing next to me was his son, my grandson Orson, then a teenager. I put my hand on his shoulder, and he didn't drop it. It was our first moment of real intimacy. After Callum died, Orson started coming to see me more often. At first, I think out of obligation, then out of curiosity. I told him about the company, how it started, the technology we were developing. To my surprise, he listened with genuine interest. Orson is now 28. There's something of Callum about him, the same chin line, the same expressive eyes. But he's more like me in character, determined, practical. Maybe that's what brought us together, or that he's never known me young, ambitious, obsessed with work. He only knows a tired old man who realized a lot of things too late. 2 years ago, Orson graduated with a master's degree in business administration and came to work at Hatton Labs. He started at the bottom, as I insisted. He worked in sales, then marketing, and studied manufacturing. He's shown himself to be smart, quick on his feet. Employees respect him. Customers trust him. I watched him and realized he could be a great successor. That's around the time he met Paige. Beautiful, smart woman, 3 years older than him. Worked as a lawyer at a firm that serviced technology companies. They met at a conference, and 6 months later, he brought her to meet me. I remember that night. Paige was charming, knew how to talk to an old guy like me, asked about the company, about my experience. She showed just the right amount of admiration. But something about her made me wary. Perhaps the overly attentive way she looked around my house, or the way the tone of her voice changed when she spoke to Orson alone. Or maybe it was just senile suspicion. They got married last spring. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. Paige had insisted I walk her down the aisle, since her own father had died years ago. I was touched by the gesture. After the ceremony, she hugged me and whispered, "You are my family now." At that moment, I almost believed her. After the wedding, Orson started talking more about the future of the company, about what changes could be made, what new markets could be developed. His ideas were fresh, sometimes risky, but generally sensible. More and more, I thought about handing over the reins to him. "You're getting sentimental, old man," my old friend and business partner Rupert Wynn once told me. "Don't be in a hurry to give away what you've spent a lifetime building." But I've seen Orson light up when he talks about the company. The way his voice changes when he talks about new projects. And I saw myself in him, that energetic young man who 50 years ago decided he could change the world. In recent months, Paige has started showing up at the office more often. At first, she just picked Orson up after work. Then she started attending some of the meetings, just to keep in the loop, as she put it. She started giving her opinions on business strategies. Smart, calculated ideas. I have to hand it to her. One day I happened to overhear their conversation in an empty conference room. Didn't mean to eavesdrop, just walk by. The door was ajar, and Paige's voice sounded unaccustomedly harsh. "You need to be more assertive, Orson. It's your right. The company should have gone to you a long time ago. Your grandfather is clinging to power, even though he knows his time has passed." "He just wants to make sure I'm ready," Orson replied, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. "You're ready now. More than ready. Talk to him. Clearly, specifically. He needs to give me a date for the transfer of control." I quietly walked away from the door. I sat in my office for a long time that night, thinking. Maybe Paige was right. Maybe I was really clinging to the company, afraid of being all alone, without the work I dedicated my life to. The next day I invited Orson over for dinner. Just him, without Paige. We were sitting in an old restaurant in downtown South Charleston that serves the best steak in the state. "I think it's time to talk about the future," I said when we were done with the main course. "Yours and the company's." Orson straightened up, his eyes lighting up. "I'm listening, Grandpa. You've proven yourself a capable leader. You have vision, you have energy. I think you're ready to take over Hatton Labs." He was silent for a few seconds, clearly not believing his ears. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. Of course, there are details to be discussed, legal technicalities, but I want you to know my intentions." He reached across the table and squeezed my palm. His eyes were moist. "Thank you for your trust. I won't let you down." In that moment, he looked so young, so full of hope. I remembered Callum at his age, the same look, the same sincerity, and somewhere deep inside, a worry stirred. Am I making the same mistake? Am I pushing too hard, even with good intentions? But then I thought about Paige, her ambition, her influence over Orson, and I decided I'd rather hand over the company on my terms than wait for her to convince him to be more aggressive. When I told Orson about my decision, he called Paige right away. I could hear the excitement in his voice, saw him nodding in response to something she said. When he ended the call, he looked even more enthusiastic. "Paige suggests we have a formal handover ceremony," he said. "With the press, the partners, all the key people. Show the continuity, the stability of the company." I nodded, though I would have preferred a more modest event. But maybe she was right. Symbols are important in business. After that, events moved quickly. The lawyers were preparing the paperwork. Paige was organizing the ceremony. Orson spent more and more time with department heads delving into ongoing projects. I watched all of this with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, I was proud of my grandson, delighted by his enthusiasm. On the other hand, I couldn't get rid of a vague anxiety, especially when I saw Paige whisper something in Orson's ear during meetings. How he changed his mind after a short conversation with her. I got home late one night and found the light on in the living room. Orson was waiting for me, sitting in an armchair with a glass of whiskey, my whiskey from my personal stockpile. "I'm sorry to drop by uninvited," he said with a slight smile. "I wanted to discuss a couple things." He started talking about the restructuring of the R&D department, about how some of the older employees might be worth retiring, about a new direction that required significant investment. It all sounded reasonable, but something in his tone made me wary. He sounded as if the decisions had already been made, as if my opinion was just a formality. "Are these Paige's ideas?" I asked bluntly. He looked a little embarrassed. "We discussed it together. She's very good at business strategies." "I don't doubt that she is, but Hatton Labs is no ordinary company. We have our own specifics, our own traditions, and sometimes they get outdated," he said with sudden firmness. "The world is changing, Grandpa. We have to change with it." We talked some more, but the tension did not disappear. When he left, he hugged me as usual, but I felt the distance between us. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time. I got up, walked around the house, looked at the pictures on the walls. Octavia, Callum, young Orson, the family I'd worked my whole life for. What's left of it now? Only a grandson who's slowly being alienated by his ambitious wife. And that's when I made a decision. I'm going to turn the company over to Orson just like I planned. But not just like that, I'm taking precautions. Just in case. The next day I started calling my old friends. Investors, partners, people I'd built businesses with. People who still trust me more than anyone else. The process of transferring the company turned out to be more complicated than I expected. Not on the legal side. It was relatively straightforward. My lawyers prepared all the necessary documents within a week. The difficulty lay in the emotional side of things. Every time I signed another piece of paper, I felt a part of me leave with the ink. Today, Orson and I arrived at the Hatton Labs office earlier than usual. I wanted to show him the nuances of the morning procedures, to introduce him to the employees who come in first. These are the people who have been working here for decades. Technicians, engineers, lab technicians. Those who make up the backbone of the company, though they rarely show up in corporate photos. "Good morning, Mr. Hatton," smiled Elaine, our senior lab technician. "You're early today." "I want to show my grandson how things really work, not just on paper," I said, shaking her hand. "Elaine has been with us for 27 years. She knows every device, every procedure. She once helped me with the first experimental models of our analyzers. I'm glad you finally decided on a succession," she said, giving Orson an appraising look. "The company needs young energy." "I hope to live up to your expectations," Orson replied, and I noticed a slight uncertainty in his voice. He knew these people would judge him by the high standards I'd set over half a century. We walked around all the departments, labs, and production areas. I introduced Orson to those who were not yet familiar with him, explained the specifics of each department. Orson asked intelligent questions and made notes in his clipboard. I could see the respect growing in his eyes. He really wanted to understand what made the company successful, not just to take my place. By 10 o'clock, the department heads arrived, and we had our first formal meeting where I announced the impending transfer of management. The reaction was predictable, a mixture of surprise, concern, and curiosity. No one voiced open displeasure, but I saw tense faces and heard quiet conversations in the hallways after the meeting. "They're just not used to the change," Orson said when we got back to my office. "Give them time, and they'll accept me." "This isn't about you," I replied. "It was about me. I've been a constant in their lives for decades. Change is scary, even if it's for the better." At lunchtime, Paige joined us. She came in wearing an elegant business suit with a new haircut that made her look like a successful businesswoman from a magazine cover. She brought lunch from an expensive restaurant for all three of us. "I thought you were both too busy to go out," she said, setting the containers on the table in my office. We were having lunch, discussing plans for the coming weeks. Paige talked about new marketing strategies, about the possibility of expanding production, about potential investors she could attract through her former legal colleagues. She spoke intelligently, knowledgeably, and yet something in her words bothered me. Maybe an overconfidence, or the way she looked at me as if I no longer mattered, as if I were a relic of the past about to disappear. "Your ideas are interesting," I said finally, "but Hatton Labs has always been a conservative company. We've grown slowly but surely. Our reputation is built on reliability, not innovation for innovation's sake." "Pho. With respect, Ambrose," she replied, blotting her lips with her napkin. "But the world is changing faster than ever. Companies that don't adapt are dying. Look at Eastman Kodak, at Blockbuster. Giants that couldn't reinvent themselves. And we're not Kodak. Our market is more stable. For now. But new technologies can change even lab equipment, artificial intelligence, automation, nanotechnology. You have to stay ahead of the wave, not try to catch it. I noticed the way Orson was looking at his wife. With admiration, almost adoration. He was nodding in agreement with her words, in complete agreement with her vision. We'll discuss this later, I said, finishing my lunch. Right now, we need to meet with representatives from Meridian Pharma. They're our biggest client, and they need to hear about the management changes in person. Paige nodded, but I noticed the slight irritation in her eyes. She was looking forward to a longer conversation, perhaps to my endorsement of her ideas. But I had my own plans for the day. The meeting with Meridian Pharma went smoothly. Edward Prescott, their director of research and development, had been a friend of mine for 20 years. We played golf together and had lunch at the same club. He was receptive to the news, though I noticed a shadow of concern on his face. "So, Ambrose, are you sure you're ready to retire?" He asked me when we were alone for a while. "We have always valued a personal relationship with you. Orson is well prepared on my in Suriname," I replied. And I'll be around for the first few days to make sure everything goes smoothly." "And his wife? I hear she's very ambitious." I smiled, not showing my concern. "She just cares about her husband's future. It's only natural." Edward nodded, but his look said he wasn't quite convinced. We went back to the officials and ended the meeting with an exchange of pleasantries and promises to maintain a fruitful cooperation. Over the next few days, we had several more such meetings with key clients and partners. Orson held himself confidently and answered questions intelligently. I could see that he made a good impression on most of our business partners. Still, some of them called me personally after the meetings to make sure I wasn't completely off my game. Paige attended all of these meetings, even though she wasn't formally affiliated with the company. She always found a way to gracefully interject herself into the conversation, to offer insight, to demonstrate competence. On the third day, I noticed that Orson began to talk less, more often ceding the floor to his wife. That evening, I invited him to my office for a drink. "What's going on, Orson?" I asked him bluntly. "Why are you letting Paige speak for you?" He looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "She's just helping me. She has a lot of experience in corporate negotiations. You run the company, not her. Our partners need to see your confidence, your leadership." He blushed slightly, a sign that my words had hurt him. "I appreciate the advice, Grandpa, but it's up to me to decide how to run the business." "Of course," I agreed, stepping back. "Just remember that Hatton Labs is built on personal relationships as much as contracts. People need to trust you personally, not your advisors, no matter how talented they are." He nodded, but I could see that the conversation was uncomfortable for him. We finished our whiskey in awkward silence, and he left earlier than usual, referring to dinner with friends. The next day, Paige didn't show up for work, and Orson behaved more independently, more confidently. He gave an impressive presentation to a group of potential investors, answered tough questions without stuttering, even made a few jokes to lighten the atmosphere. I saw my younger self in him, that ambitious man who was not afraid to take risks and believed in his own abilities. After the presentation, one of the investors, Harrison Kingsley, took me aside. "Good boy," he said, nodding at Orson, who was talking to others in the meeting. "But I hear his wife has a lot of influence over him. Is that true?" "Family relationships are always complicated," I answered evasively. "And Aram, don't quibble, old fox," Harrison grinned. "I've known you for 30 years. Are you worried that she might take the company in the wrong direction?" I sighed. Harrison was one of the few people I could be completely honest with. Paige is smart and ambitious. Those are good qualities, but she's in too much of a hurry, too eager for change. Hatton Labs is like a fine wine. It takes time and patience. "What are you going to do?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I want to make sure my life's work isn't destroyed by hasty decisions. Can I count on your support if the need arises?" Harrison looked at me carefully, then nodded. "You know my number. Call me anytime." It was the first of many such conversations I had over the next few days. I met with investors and partners, not formally, but over lunch, at the golf club, sometimes just during phone calls late at night. I didn't talk directly about my concerns, but I made it clear that I could address them in the future. And each of them, people with whom we've been through the ups and downs of the business, pledged their support. I also met with our lawyers making small but important changes to the management transfer agreements. Changes that neither Orson nor Page knew about. Insurance in case my worst fears came true. On Friday, we had a meeting with all the department heads. Page was there again, sitting next to Orson, whispering comments on every word that was said. I noticed some of the senior managers exchanging glances when she interrupted Mark Donnelly, our technical director, for the third time. With respect, Mrs. Hatton, Mark finally said, not hiding his irritation. But this technology is proven with 20 years of experience. We can't just abandon it in favor of an unproven alternative. 20 years in today's world is an eternity, Page countered. Sherikum, we're talking about the future of the company, not the status quo for sentimental reasons. It's not about sentimentality, it's about reliability. That's enough, I interjected, feeling the tension rising. We'll discuss all the options, weigh the pros and cons. No hasty decisions. After the meeting, I noticed Page saying something fervently to Orson in the hallway. He was nodding, but he looked unsure. When they saw me, the conversation stopped immediately. Ambrose, Page smiled her perfect smile. We were just talking about how the meeting went. I think some of your managers are too conservative. Sabrine, conservatism has its advantages in our industry, I replied flatly. We manufacture equipment for medical research. One mistake can cost millions and, more importantly, undermine customer confidence. Sorry, but stagnation can also be deadly to a business, she objected. Competitors don't stand still. I have a meeting scheduled, I said, not wanting to continue this argument in the hallway. I'll see you later. I did have a meeting, but not at the office. I drove to the country club, where Rupert Wynn, my oldest friend and business partner, one of the first investors in Hatton Labs, was waiting for me. Rupert was already waiting for me on the club's terrace, sipping his customary gin and tonic. At 78, he still looked as imposing as ever, a straight back, attentive eyes, and an impeccably trimmed gray beard. Shimonomon. You look lousy, he said in lieu of greeting. Is the transfer of power not going according to plan? I ordered a whiskey and told him everything about Paige, about her influence on Orson, about my concerns. Ah, cool. So why don't you just stop the process? Rupert asked when I was done. Tell the boy it's too soon. And lose his trust? Possibly push him away forever? No, I've already been through that with Callum. I don't want to make the same mistake. Rupert swirled the ice in his glass thoughtfully. So you want to hand over the company but with guarantees? Exactly. I've made some changes to the contracts. Technically, Orson will have full control, but key contracts with our major clients will still require my signature. If something goes wrong, if Paige really starts pushing dangerous changes, I can step in. And you think they won't notice the catch? Ah, sorry, it's not a catch. It's insurance. And no, they won't. Paige is too confident in her legal background to scrutinize standard clauses in contracts. Rupert shook his head. It's a risky game, Ambrose, especially since it's your family we're talking about. Sometimes you have to take risks to protect what's important. And what if it goes to the extreme? What if I have to activate this, insurance policy? I looked up at the setting sun, coloring the sky orange. Then I would act decisively, without hesitation. But I hope it doesn't come to that Orson sees his wife's true colors before she does irreparable damage. Sure, you've always been an optimist, Rupert grinned. That's why I invested in you half a century ago. But be prepared for the worst-case scenario. I am, I said, and there was a confidence in my voice that I didn't really feel. When I got home, I found Orson waiting for me in the living room. He looked worried. Grandpa, we need to talk, he said without preamble. I'm listening. I know you have your doubts about Paige. I see the way you look at her, the way you react to her suggestions. I sighed and sat down in the chair across from him. I have no doubts about her intelligence or ambition, only in her understanding of the specifics of our business. She wants what's best. For the company, for both of us. I know she does, but sometimes wanting what's best can lead to unnecessary risks. Orson's leaning forward. I want you two to find common ground. It's important to me. I saw the sincere request in his eyes. The boy really loved his wife and wanted his family to be united. I remembered myself at his age, just as idealistic, just as sure that it was possible to combine business and family harmony. Shilmonurm. I'll do my best, I said finally. but Paige has to show respect for what came before her. She will, Orson said confidently. Just give her a chance. We talked some more about the upcoming handover ceremony, about plans for the future. Orson was enthusiastic, talking about new markets, about technological improvements, about expanding production. I listened and wondered how many of these ideas were actually Paige's. When Orson left, I sat alone in the darkening living room for a long time. The house seemed too big, too empty. I imagined Octavia would sit down next to me, take my hand and say, "You think too much, Ambrose. Trust your heart." But my heart was telling me to be careful, to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The following week, we were to have a formal handover ceremony. Paige insisted it be held at my house, symbolizing continuity, family tradition. I agreed, although I would have preferred a more neutral location. Saturday morning, I made the final call, finalizing my security plan. Victor Killian, our largest investor, assured me that everything was ready. If need be, he could withdraw his support within the hour. "I hope it doesn't come to that," he said. "But I'm with you, Ambrose. Always have been and always will be." I hung up the phone and looked at the picture of Octavia on my bedside table. "Am I doing the right thing?" I asked her smiling face. "Or just can't let go of control like Callum always said?" The photo, of course, didn't answer. But I knew Octavia would support my caution. She'd always been a good judge of people's character, and she never fully trusted those who were too quick to show their affection. I got up, got dressed, and began preparing for the ceremony that was going to change the future of the company, my family, and possibly my life. The day of the company handover was surprisingly sunny for October in South Charleston. My house, normally quiet and deserted, was filled with people, voices, life. Paige hired a professional team who transformed the living room and terrace into an elegant reception space, complete with white flowers, champagne, and a buffet from the best restaurant in town. A photographer from a local business newspaper circled among the guests, capturing a historic moment of generational continuity, as Paige put it. I watched it all from my office, trying to collect my thoughts before the formal part. I looked out the window at the cars pulling up, at the well-dressed men and women, investors, partners, clients, friends, people with whom he had built a business over decades. There was a quiet knock on the door, and Orson walked in. He was wearing a new suit that must have cost a fortune. Dark blue, perfectly tailored, with thin stripes. A gold-toned tie, cufflinks engraved with an X, the company logo. Paige clearly had a hand in his look. "Nervous?" I asked, adjusting his tie, though it was in perfect condition. "A little," he admitted. "All these people are here because of you, not because of me. They believe in you, Sanon, and they'll believe in you when they know you better." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You're ready for this, Orson. I wouldn't have handed over the company if I thought otherwise." He nodded, but I could see the shadow of doubt in his eyes, the uncertainty he was trying to hide behind a flawless facade. "Paige says I need to be more decisive," he said quietly. "Show that I'm capable of making changes, not just maintaining the status quo." "Change will come with time, naturally," I replied. "Take your time. First earn the trust of your team, your customers, your investors. Then start implementing your ideas." "Our ideas," he corrected. "William, Paige and we'd been thinking a lot about the future of the company." I didn't say anything. It wasn't the time for arguments or doubts. "Time to go," I said, glancing at my watch. "Our guests are waiting." We walked out into the living room, instantly becoming the center of attention. Paige immediately joined us, taking Orson's arm. She looked stunning in a pale blue dress, with a pearl necklace and perfect styling. A real businesswoman, the future mistress of an empire. "Everything is going according to plan," she whispered. "Victor Killian is already here, as well as representatives of Meridian Pharma. I've invited a few journalists, from Business Insider and the Technology Herald. Good publicity never hurts." I nodded, though I would have preferred a more chamber-like event. But today was as much her day as Orson's. Maybe even more so. The next hour passed in greetings, handshakes, and brief conversations with the guests. I noticed how many of them were looking at Orson appraisingly, trying to see if he was worthy of leading the company I had built and nurtured. Some approached me with questions they didn't dare ask directly. "Are you really stepping away from the business completely?" Harrison Kingsley asked when we were alone at the bar for a while. "I'll advise on important matter," I answered. "Oh, but Orson will take over the operational management. And you trust him? Harrison sounded doubtful. Or rather, do you trust his wife? I sipped my whiskey before answering. Trust has to be earned. They'll have that opportunity. Harrison nodded understandingly. We'd known each other a long time, and he could read between the lines. My phone is always on, he said quietly. Remember that. At 6 o'clock that evening, Paige elegantly rang her glass with a silver spoon, drawing the attention of everyone present. It was time for the formal part. Ladies and gentlemen, she began with a professional smile, we are gathered here tonight to celebrate an important moment in the history of Hatton Labs, a moment when one outstanding leader passes the baton to the next generation. She spoke beautifully with just the right pauses and intonation, about my vision, about my contributions to laboratory technology, about how I built a company from the ground up and turned it into an industry leader, about my dedication to quality, innovation, and ethical standards. Then she moved on to Orson, his education, his experience with the company, his new vision for the future. She spoke of him with pride, the way a mother would speak of her son, not a wife of her husband. And it struck me as odd. And now, she concluded, I am proud to invite Ambrose Hatton to formally hand over the leadership of Hatton Labs to his grandson, Orson Hatton. Applause, cameras, flashes. I stepped forward, carrying an antique wooden box. In it lay a golden key. Symbolic, of course, but meaningful to us. The key to the company's first office, which we had sold long ago, but kept the artifact as a reminder of our roots. I stood in front of Orson, looking him in the eye. He looked excited, almost like a boy receiving an important gift. 50 years ago, I began, and the hum of voices died down. I opened a small laboratory in the basement of a rented building. I had only ideas, ambition, and the support of my wife, Octavia. I couldn't imagine what it would turn into. I talked about the beginning, the difficulties, the first successes, about how we risked everything to fund the development of new technologies, the nights spent drawing and calculating, about the first big contract that changed everything. Today, Hatton Labs is more than just a company. It's a community of dedicated people. It's innovation that saves lives. It's a legacy that I'm proud to put in the hands of my grandson, Orson. I opened the box and took out a golden key. With this symbolic key, I pass on to you, Orson, not only the management of the company, but the responsibility for its future, for the people who work there, to the customers who rely on the quality of our products, for the legacy we've all built together. I put the key in his hand and he squeezed my fingers tightly. Thank you, Grandpa, he said in a trembling voice. I promise to continue the tradition of quality and innovation you've established, and at the same time lead the company forward into a new era of opportunity. We embraced amid camera flashes and applause. I felt the tension of the last few weeks recede a bit. Maybe everything was going to be okay. Maybe my fears had been exaggerated. After the formal part, the evening continued in a more relaxed atmosphere. Guests drank, chatted, and congratulated Orson and Paige. I noticed how confident Paige was in her conversations with key investors, how she stood next to Orson as he was photographed for the press. She was in her element, the center of attention, the mistress of the position. By 10 o'clock in the evening, most of the guests had dispersed. Only the closest people remained. A few old friends, Rupert Wynn, Harrison Kingsley, a couple of reporters who were still taking comments from Orson. I felt tired. It had been a long and emotionally intense day. I went up to my office for a little break from the noise and people, sat down in a chair, closed my eyes. I tried to imagine what Octavia would say when she saw today. Would she be proud of me? Would she approve of my decision? And what about Callum? Would he finally forgive me for all the mistakes of the past? I didn't realize I dozed off. I woke to the sound of the front door closing, the last of the guests leaving. The clock read almost midnight. I stood up, stretching my stiff muscles, and went downstairs. The living room was empty except for Orson and Paige. They were standing by the fireplace talking in quiet voices. Paige was holding a glass of champagne, but seemed completely sober. Orson, on the other hand, looked slightly intoxicated, flushed, with his tie loosened. Ah, Grandpa, he said, noticing me. We thought you'd gone to bed. I dozed off in the study, I replied. Long day. And historic, Paige added, raising her glass. To the new era of Hatton Labs. I nodded, not sharing the toast. Something changed in the atmosphere, becoming tense, almost electric. It was a good event, I said to lighten the mood. Paige, you did a great job organizing it. This is just the beginning, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nant, I have big plans for the future. We do, Orson corrected her gently. We have big plans. Of course, darling, she stroked his arm, but her gaze was directed at me. By the way, Ambrose, we wanted to talk to you about the practicalities of the transition. Now? I was surprised. It's late. We can discuss it tomorrow in the office. It won't take long, she insisted, and it's not so much about the company as it is about personal matters. I sat back in my chair, feeling the fatigue give way to wariness. I'm listening. Paige set down her glass and came closer. Orson and I were discussing future organizational changes. As you know, the company needs a new direction, a new energy. And in order to do that, it needs to clear the space. What do you mean by that? We think, Orson intervened, but his voice sounded uncertain, that it would be better if you actually stepped aside. Completely. I've already handed over control, I reminded him. Today, in case you hadn't noticed. It's not just about official control, Paige continued. It's about presence. Your influence in the company is too great. People will always turn to you, not Orson, as long as you're around. I was beginning to see where she was going with this. So what are you suggesting? Paige exchanged a glance with Orson, as if to invite him to speak further, but he remained silent. We think you should move, she said finally. Maybe to that estate in Florida you've always talked about? Warm climate, golf all year round. Perfect for a man your age. My age, I repeated slowly. And when did you decide I should move? It's not a sudden decision, Paige said. One. We've been discussing for a long time that it would be better for the company if the new management could operate without, let's say, historical constraints. Paige, Orson put his hand on her shoulder. Maybe not now. Grandpa's tired and... No, Orson, she brushed his hand away. It's better to be clear at once. Ambrose, we appreciate everything you've done. But time marches on. The company needs drastic changes that you're not always ready to support. She came very close to me, and her voice became softer, almost caressing. Think about it. Wouldn't you rather spend your remaining years in peace, enjoying the fruits of your labor, not clinging to the past? Enough, Konim. Clinging, I stood up, feeling the anger rising inside. Interesting choice of words for a company I built from scratch, for the house I'd built. Grandpa, Orson finally found his voice, we didn't mean to offend you. It's just, Paige is right. You need a vacation, and we need room to maneuver. I looked at him, the boy I loved more than life, the one I trusted with my legacy. And I saw in his eyes not anger, not cruelty, just weakness. He couldn't stand up to his wife, couldn't even protect his own grandfather. I understand, I said quietly. You need space. I turned to leave, but Paige stopped me with a hand on my shoulder. There's something else, Ambrose. We want to start renovating the house soon, a major remodel, and it would be more convenient if I got out as soon as possible, I finished for her. She smiled, and it was a cold, calculating smile. I'd put it more mildly, but the point is the same. Say by the end of the week? I looked at her for a long moment. You know, Paige, you're a good strategist, but there's something you haven't considered. What's that? Sometimes the simplest strategy is the most effective. I turned around and went upstairs to my bedroom. I opened the closet, pulled out a small bag, and started putting away the essentials. A few sets of clothes, toiletries, medications, a picture of Octavia, a wedding picture of her and me, a few books I'd reread over and over again. Orson appeared in the doorway when I was almost done. Grandpa, you don't have to leave right now. This isn't what we meant. That's exactly what you meant, I replied without turning to him. Just plan to say it in a more veiled way later. Paige was just speeding things up. I'll talk to her. We'll find a compromise. I zipped up my bag and finally looked at him. No, Orson, you're not going to talk to her. You've already made your choice, and I respect it, even if I don't agree with it. I walked over to him, put my hand on his shoulder. I love you, boy. Always have and always will. But right now you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet and live with the consequences of your decisions. I walked past him, down the stairs. Paige was standing by the front door, as if guarding it. She didn't look remorseful or embarrassed. On the contrary, there was a look of satisfaction in her eyes. "You forget your keys," she said, handing me a bunch. "You won't need them anymore." I took the keys, our fingers touching for a second. "You know what your biggest mistake was, Paige?" "Ah, tino mean," I asked quietly. "You think a company is buildings, contracts, bank accounts. But a company is first and foremost about people and the trust between them." "Philosophizing goodbye?" She grinned. "That's nice. But business isn't about philosophy. It's about results. And believe me, they'll be better than they were under you." "Maybe," I shrugged. "Time will tell." I walked out of the house without looking back. The night air was cool, the stars shining brightly in the clear sky. I got into the car, started the engine. Only then did I allow myself a few seconds of weakness. I squeezed the steering wheel until my knuckles were white, closed my eyes, took a deep breath. Then I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Victor, it's Ambrose. Sorry for the late call, but it's time to activate our plan." "Yeah, just like we discussed. Call the others. We don't have much time." I hung up and hit the road. 10 minutes later, I called Rupert, then Harrison. Each of them understood the situation without further explanation. Each knew what to do. By 1 o'clock in the morning, I checked into a small but cozy hotel room downtown. By 2 o'clock, I received the first confirmations. Key investors were withdrawing their support, partners were freezing joint projects, clients were suspending contracts. By 3 o'clock, I got a message from my stockbroker. Hatton Labs shares in Asia were already falling, and that was just the beginning. By 4 in the morning, I finally went to bed, turning off my phone. My heart was heavy from the decisions I had to make, from the pain of betrayal, from the realization that my relationship with my grandson would now be irrevocably damaged. But there was also a strange lightness. I had done what I had to do, protected my legacy, showed that old ties and trust are sometimes stronger than legal documents and the ambitions of young upstarts. As I fell asleep, I thought about Orson and Paige, about the look of shock on their faces when they'd start getting the news, about how quickly their perfect plan would fall apart, how they would realize that the company wasn't just assets to take from the old man. "The company is finally ours," Paige said. How naive she'd been, how naive they'd both been. The morning would bring a new reality, for them, for me, for Hatton Labs, and I was ready to face it with my eyes open. I awoke to the insistent ringing of my cell phone. The sun was already high. It was almost noon, judging by the rays filtering through the hotel room curtains. My head was buzzing from lack of sleep and the stress of the previous night. The phone kept ringing. The name Orson popped up on the screen. The 10th call of the morning, according to the notifications. I muted the sound and put the phone screen down. It wasn't time to talk yet. Slowly getting out of bed, I walked to the window and slid the curtains open. The view was of downtown South Charleston, the neat streets, the old buildings, the park with the trees nearly leafed out. Somewhere out there, in a glass and concrete office building, chaos was now reigning. I could almost picture it, the ringing phones, the emergency meetings, the panic in Paige's eyes, Orson's confusion. I showered, shaved, and dressed in the only business suit I'd managed to grab from home. I ordered coffee and oatmeal for the room. While I ate breakfast, I watched the news on my tablet. Business publications had already picked up the story. Hatton Labs crisis. Key investors withdraw support. Hatton Labs shares plummet 30% after management changes. Contracts torn up. What's happening to the lab equipment giant? The phone vibrated again. This time it was Rupert calling. "Do you see what's going on?" he asked without preamble when I answered. "I see the news," I said. "This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's panic on the stock exchange. Victor Killian has officially announced that it is withdrawing all of its investments. Meridian Pharma has canceled its contract for new equipment. 6 other major clients are on the verge of the same decision." I was silent as I listened to the crumbling of what I had spent half a century building. Strangely, I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge, only fatigue and a vague sadness. "Your grandson called me 3 times, Rupert continued. I didn't answer, but I think he'll soon figure out what happened. If Paige doesn't explain it to him, I said, she's smart enough to put two and two together. What now, Ambrose? What's your plan? I looked out the window at the city I'd known all my life. No plan yet. I need time to think. You could stay at my place, Rupert suggested. No one's lived in the guest house since my son moved to Europe. Thank you, friend. Maybe later. Right now, I need to be alone. After the conversation, I checked my phone again. There were 5 more missed calls from Orson, 2 more from unknown numbers, and dozens of messages. I didn't bother reading them. Instead, I booked a room at the Pine Forest Motel on the outskirts of town, a small, inconspicuous place where I could think quietly about the future. After paying for the hotel room, I got in my car and drove out of the city center. On the way, I stopped at a bank to withdraw cash, enough to get by for a few weeks without having to use a card. Then I bought a new prepaid cell phone for calling people who really needed to get in touch with me. The Pine Forest Motel lived up to its name, a small one-story building surrounded by tall pine trees. The place looked quiet and abandoned, which suited me just fine. The receptionist, an elderly woman with a tired look, showed no interest in the new guest. She gave me the key to room 14 and went back to watching the TV melodrama. The room was clean, though modest. A bed, a nightstand, an old TV, a small table with 2 chairs, and a tiny bathroom. After the spacious mansion I'd lived in most of my life, it seemed almost claustrophobic. But I didn't care right now. I laid out the few belongings I had, sat down on the bed, and felt truly old for the first time in a long time. 74 years old. Without a home, without company, with a ruined relationship with the only close person I had left. What am I doing with my life? The sound of a new phone brought me out of my reverie. I'd only given this number to Rupert. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Are you settled in?" "Yeah, I'm fine," I answered. "Did something happen?" "Your sister-in-law held a press conference. She's trying to reassure investors, explaining the crisis as temporary transition difficulties. But I heard from Harrison that the board has already called an emergency meeting. They're in a panic." I felt nothing but fatigue. "Let them sort it out themselves." "Ambrose, you realize this could be a total disaster, don't you? The company you've spent a lifetime building." "Maybe that's the way it should be," I interrupted. Maybe Hatton Labs had accomplished its mission. There was a long pause. "That's not like you," Rupert said at last. "You've never given up." "I'm not giving up. I'm just taking a break. I need to think." After the conversation, I decided to go for a walk. The day was clear and cool, a typical October in West Virginia. I walked along the forest path, breathing in the smell of pine needles and listening to the wind rustle in the tree crowns. For the first time in a long time, I had no commitments, no appointments, no decisions to make immediately. A strange feeling of emptiness and freedom at the same time. I thought about Octavia, about what she would say now. Probably would scold me for being vindictive. She had always been the best part of me, the kinder, more understanding part. Thought about Callum, our complicated relationship, how I tried to control his life and how it led to estrangement. Am I making the same mistake with Orson? Thought about Paige, her ambition, her calculating nature. Was she really evil, or just a young woman trying to make her way in a world where old men like me won't give way? By the time I got back to the motel, it was getting dusk. The room was cold and uncomfortable. I turned on the heater, made tea in a small electric kettle, and checked the news on my tablet again. The situation with Hatton Labs was getting worse. The stock continued to fall. Customers, one by one, were freezing their contracts. Financial analysts predicted that without urgent action, the company could be on the verge of bankruptcy within weeks. A picture of Orson and Paige on a news site caught my eye. They looked haggard, confused. Paige, always so well-groomed and confident, seemed almost aged in a single day. Orson was standing next to her, but the tension between them was palpable even in the photo. I turned off the tablet and lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. It's strange how quickly what seems immutable crumbles. One phone call, and the empire starts to come apart at the seams. One careless decision, and the family falls apart. I was awakened this morning by a knock on the door. A sharp, insistent knock. I struggled to get up, feeling my joints aching from a night on an unusually hard bed. "Who is it?" I asked without opening the door. "Ambrose, it's me, Rupert. Open up. We need to talk. I opened the door. Rupert looked alarmed. He entered the room uninvited, looking around with ill-concealed horror. God, Ambrose, how can you live in a place like this? Temporarily, I answered, shrugging my shoulders. How did you find me? I've known you for 50 years. I remember you staying here in the beginning, when you first started the company and saved money on everything. You always go back to your roots in hard times. I smiled weakly. He really knew me well. What happened? Rupert sat down in the only chair. I settled on the edge of the bed. It's worse than we thought. The board of directors is demanding your return. The investors refuse to negotiate with anyone but you. Orson's trying to save the day, but he has no experience or connections. And Paige? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She's trying to remedy the situation, but to no avail. She called Victor Killian, but he dropped the call. She tried to meet with Meridian Pharma representatives and they refused. Even offered new, more favorable terms of cooperation to Harrison. He just laughed in her face. I nodded. Everything was going according to plan, though it seemed to me now like the petty revenge of an old man unable to let go of the past. Ambrose, Rupert leaned forward, his voice serious. You have to come back, not for Orson or his wife, for the company, for the people who work there, and could lose everything. I'm not sure I can, I answered quietly, or that I want to. Of course you can, he said almost angrily. The man who started with nothing and built an empire. A man who survived 3 economic crises, the loss of his wife and son, and still kept going. Don't tell me you can't handle one ambitious daughter-in-law and a confused grandson? His words hurt something inside me. Pride, a sense of responsibility. I didn't know myself, but the feeling of powerlessness and apathy began to recede. Even if I go back, I said, what then? Paige wouldn't change. She'll always want to control Orson and the company. Saturn, you'll deal with that when the time comes, Rupert said. The important thing now is to stabilize the situation. And then you'll decide what to do next. He stood up, went to the window, looked out. Sure for him. By the way, I'm not the only one who found you. Your grandson's car is in the parking lot. He's been sitting there for an hour, hesitating to get in. I went to the window. Indeed, Orson's silver Audi was parked in the far corner of the lot. I could make out his figure behind the wheel. Well, I said, moving away from the window, then we don't have much time. Rupert, I have a favor to ask of you. Anything. Is the offer to stay in your guest house still on the table? Of course, he nodded. You can move in today. Great. Then help me pack my things. And get me out of here without Orson noticing. I'm not ready to have this conversation yet. We quickly packed my few belongings. Rupert paid for the room while I waited in his car parked on the other side of the motel. We drove away and Orson never saw us. Rupert's guest house was a real lifesaver. Cozy, spacious, with large windows overlooking the manicured garden. After the dreary motel room, it seemed almost heavenly. Make yourself comfortable, Rupert said, showing me to my room. The fridge is full and the bar is full. Call me if you need anything. I'm in the main house. Left alone, I finally checked my main phone, which I'd kept off until now. 56 missed calls, over 100 messages. From Orson, from co-workers, from business associates, even from journalists who'd somehow gotten my number. One of the messages caught my attention, from Paige, sent late at night. Ambrose, I know you're the one behind everything that's going on. I don't know how you did it, but you're destroying what you've spent a lifetime building. Think of the consequences, about the company, the people who work there, about Orson. We can discuss this like adults. Call me. No apology, no admission of guilt, just an attempt to appeal to my sense of responsibility. Typical of her. I put the phone away and walked to the window. Rupert's garden was beautiful even in the fall. The neatly trimmed bushes, the late blooming flowers, the stone paths. Why had I never had time to create such beauty in my own garden? A new phone rang, one that only Rupert knew the number of. Turn on the TV, he said without greeting. Channel 12. Your sister-in-law is being interviewed. I found the remote and turned on the TV. Paige was sitting in the studio of a local TV station, impeccably dressed and coiffed, but with noticeable circles under her eyes that even professional makeup couldn't hide. The situation with Hatton Labs is really complicated, she said in a calm, confident voice. but we are working to resolve it. It's the natural difficulties of transition when a company of this size changes management. And how would you comment on rumors that the company's founder, Ambrose Hatton, is intentionally undermining the company? The anchor asked. For a split second, anger flashed across Paige's face, but she quickly got over it. This is absurd speculation. Ambrose Hatton created this company and loves it with all his heart. He would never do anything to harm it. At present, he has taken a well-deserved vacation and does not interfere with operations. But his whereabouts are unknown, and he is not answering his call, the presenter insisted. This is strange for a man who supposedly supports the new management. Paige smiled her professional smile. Mr. Hatton has earned the right to privacy after decades of hard work. We keep in touch with him and respect his desire for a break from publicity. I turned off the TV. Lying came easily to her, I could tell. But there was desperation in her eyes. I spent the rest of the day in Rupert's guest house, thinking about the future. I checked the news from time to time as the situation with the company got worse. In the evening, Rupert brought dinner, and we ate together, discussing what might happen. You'll have to come back, he said when we had finished eating. The only question is on what terms. I know, I answered, but I need to talk to Orson first, without Paige. Find out what he really thinks and what he wants. Surely enough soon. And how do you plan to arrange that? She won't leave his side. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe I should let him find me, but on my turf, on my terms. Rupert nodded understandingly. Use my house. I can leave for a day or two so you can talk without interference. Thank you, friend. I appreciate your help. After Rupert left, I sat down to write a letter to Orson. Not an email, but a real one, by hand. Explaining my actions, my concerns, my love for him and the company. I didn't accuse Paige directly, but I didn't hide my feelings about her ambitions. At the end, I gave Rupert's address and the time I'd expect him to talk to me. Alone without his wife, I finished the letter well past midnight and sealed it in an envelope and put it on the table. Rupert would deliver it tomorrow through a trusted courier. In the meantime, I needed to rest and collect my thoughts before the most important conversation of my life. Lying in the dark on the comfortable bed, I thought about how quickly life was changing. Just a few days ago, I had a home, a company, a family. Now I was a guest in someone else's house, with no definite plans for the future, with broken family relationships, and yet I felt a strange calmness. It was as if the weight of responsibility I had been carrying for decades had finally let me breathe more freely. For the first time in a long time, I could let myself think not about the company, not about business, but about what I really wanted out of my remaining years. With these thoughts, I fell asleep, deeply and peacefully, as I hadn't slept in a long time. The morning began with an unexpected phone call. I was just having breakfast in Rupert's guest room, enjoying the silence and a good cup of coffee, when my new phone rang. Ambrose Hatton? An unfamiliar male voice asked when I answered. Yes, that's me. Who am I speaking to? My name is Lawrence Eddington. I'm the CEO of Precision Instruments. I hope you remember me. We met at a conference in Chicago 3 years ago. I remembered him vaguely, a tall, middle-aged man, ambitious with a sharp mind. Precision Instruments was one of our main competitors, though smaller in size. Of course, Mr. Eddington. To what do I owe this call? And how, if it's no secret, did you get this number? He laughed softly. There are few secrets in our business, Mr. Hatton. As to the reason for the call, I've been following the situation surrounding your company. An impressive move, I must admit. Not many people could demonstrate their influence so effectively. I don't know what you mean, I replied neutrally. Of course you do, and I respect your discretion. Let me get to the point. I would like to meet you in person. I have a proposal that might interest you. What kind of proposal? The kind you don't discuss over the phone, he said with a smile. Let's just say I believe in the value of experience and connections, and I'm willing to invest in them. Generously, I wondered. Eddington was clearly offering me a role in his company. Using the Hatton Labs situation to his advantage, he was trying to poach me, or more accurately, my connections and influence in the marketplace. Where and when do you propose to meet? Akim, I finally asked. I'm in South Charleston right now. I can come to any place that's convenient for you. Or, if you'd prefer a neutral location, I suggest the Riverview restaurant tonight at 7 o'clock. Riverview will be fine. I said. See you later, Mr. Eddington. After the call, I sat for a long time thinking. Eddington's offer was unexpected, but not surprising. Competitors always keep an eye on each other's problems, ready to capitalize on any situation. The question was whether I was ready to take that chance. Was I ready at 74 years old to start over, going to a competitor of the company I had built with my own hands? Rupert entered without knocking, interrupting my musings. "No, here," he said, laying the morning paper on the table. "I think you'll find it interesting." On the front page of the business section was a picture of Orson leaving the Hatton Labs building. He looked haggard, with eyes red from lack of sleep. The headline read, "Hatton Labs crisis deepens. Stock drops another 15%. The article claims that major clients are waiting for you to return before renewing contracts, Rupert said. The board is considering removing Orson and appointing an interim manager. So soon? I was surprised. It had only been a few days. Modern business doesn't forgive mistakes, Rupert shrugged, especially when millions are at stake. I told him about Eddington's call and the upcoming meeting. That's an interesting twist, Rupert said thoughtfully. Are you seriously considering his offer? I don't know, I answered honestly. On the one hand, it's a chance to start again, without the burden of past mistakes. On the other, it's like betraying everything I've built. What about Orson? I sighed. He made his choice when he let Paige kick me out. Now let him live with the consequences. Rupert looked at me carefully. Do you really feel that way? Or is that just resentment talking? I didn't answer. I didn't know. The day dragged on slowly. I watched the news, read the reports on the state of Hatton Labs that Rupert had brought me from our mutual acquaintances. The situation was worse than I expected. The company was losing not only money, but also key employees who had begun looking for new jobs. At 6 o'clock that evening, I started to get ready for my meeting with Eddington. Rupert had lent me his car, less conspicuous than my own, which might have attracted attention. The Riverview restaurant was riverside with panoramic windows and fine dining. One of the most expensive in South Charleston, a place where important deals were usually made and confidential meetings held. Eddington was already waiting for me at a table in the corner, overlooking the river. He stood up as I approached, extending his hand for a handshake. Mr. Hatton, thank you for agreeing to meet. It's an honor. We sat down, ordered drinks, a whiskey for me, a martini for him. After an exchange of pleasantries, Eddington got down to business. I won't beat around the bush, he said, leaning back in his chair. Precision Instruments would like to offer you the position of special consultant for strategic development, with very generous compensation and complete discretion. What exactly would my responsibilities be? I asked, even though I already knew. Officially, development consulting, market analysis, helping to establish new business relationships. Unofficially, he paused. We are interested in your relationships with key clients and investors, especially those who are now turning their backs on Hatton Labs. Straightforward and honest. I appreciate that. Are you suggesting I use my influence against my own company? Eddington raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. I'm offering you a fresh start. Hatton Labs is no longer your company, is it? You've gone out of business yourself. And judging by the current situation, not on the best of terms with the new management. He was right, and it hurt my feelings. What are the terms? I asked, just to keep the conversation going. Eddington named a sum, impressive even by the standards of top management, plus shares, bonuses, all the perks. We're also willing to consider renaming the company to include your name in the title. Hatton Precision, for example. It would be a symbol of continuity for clients. That's a tempting offer. A chance to get back in the game, feel important again, and to get back at Paige for real, not just by ruining her plans, but by creating a direct competitor who would take over the clients in the market. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course you do, Eddington nodded. It's a big decision, but don't wait too long. In business, windows of opportunity close quickly. We had dinner, discussing common acquaintances, market trends, and technological developments. Eddington proved to be an intelligent conversationalist, well-versed in the industry. I could see why Precision Instruments had grown so rapidly under his leadership. As we said goodbye, He handed me a business card with a personal phone number. I look forward to your decision, Mr. Hatton. I'm sure we can do something great together. On the drive home, I pondered his offer. Part of me was tempted. It would be the perfect way to prove my worth, to show Orson and Paige what a mistake they'd made. The other part resisted. It would mean undoing everything I believed in, betraying the company I'd given my life to. Rupert was waiting for me at home, pacing impatiently in the living room. "Well?" he asked as I entered. "How was the meeting?" I told him all the details, including the proposed terms. "Pretty impressive," he whistled. "What did you decide?" "Nothing yet." I sat back in my chair, feeling suddenly tired. "I need to think it over." Rupert nodded, but I could see that he wanted to say something. "Spit it out," I urged him. "What's on your mind?" "Ah." "While you were having dinner with Eddington, Orson was here," he said. "Alone, without Paige." I straightened in my chair. "Orson? How did he know I was here?" "I told him," Rupert admitted. "He looked so lost, so desperate. I couldn't refuse him." "What did he want?" "To talk to you." He said he finally realized what had happened, that he realized how Paige had been manipulating him all this time. I felt something clench in my chest, a mixture of hope and mistrust. "Do you believe him?" "Yes," Rupert said firmly. "He was sincere, and he looked terrible, Ambrose, like a man who had lost everything." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Well, now he knows what it's like." "Ashilnung, he's your grandson," Rupert reminded me gently. "The only family you have left. He chose Paige's side. He's young and he was blinded. Haven't you ever made a mistake because of a woman?" I remembered my younger years, how much I was in love with Octavia, how I would do anything for her, how she had gently but firmly guided me when I was ready to do something stupid in business or my personal life. "Where is he now?" I finally asked. "Back home. Said he'd be home tomorrow. Wants to talk to you when you're ready." I nodded, not saying a word. My thoughts were jumbled in my head. The Eddington offer, Orson's visit, the future of the company, my life, my family. "I'm going to bed," I said, getting up. "Tomorrow would be a hard day." During the night, I dreamed of Octavia. We were young, just beginning our journey. She laughed, looking at me with her bright eyes, and said, "You always choose the hardest path, Ambrose, but that's why I love you." I woke with the first rays of the sun, feeling a strange determination. It was as if I had found the answer in a dream that I could not find in real life. At 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there was Orson, pale, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Son, Grandpa," he said quietly. "May I come in?" I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. We went into the living room and sat across from each other. We were silent for a while, not knowing how to start the conversation. "Imad, I've ruined everything," Orson finally said, looking at his hands. "The company, our relationship, everything." "Not just you," I answered. "I played my part in this story too." He looked up and I saw pain and remorse in his eyes. "No, Grandfather. You tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. I was too sure I knew better. Too in love. And now," he grinned bitterly, "I see things clearly now. Paige never loved me. Only what I represented: access to the company, to money, to status. What made you change your mind?" Orson took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "After you left and the crisis began, I tried to save the day. I called clients, investors, partners, begged them to give us a chance, but they refused to even talk to me. All they wanted was you." He paused, remembering. Paige was becoming more and more irritable, more and more controlling, yelling at the staff, accusing everyone around her of incompetence. And then, Orson swallowed, and I could see how hard it was for him to speak. "She was talking to some man, talking about how things hadn't gone according to plan, how the old man was trickier than we thought. Said that as soon as things stabilized, they could go back to the original plan. Something about selling off the company's assets piecemeal, refocusing the business." "Did you confront her?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Yes," he nodded. "It was terrible." That evening, when Orson heard Paige's phone conversation, he waited until she got home. She looked exhausted but still held herself with her usual confidence. "Rough day?" Orson asked, watching her from the living room chair. "Unbearable," she sighed, kicking off her shoes. "Your grandfather destroyed in 2 days what we could have built in years. The stock keeps falling, clients are canceling contracts, and that's ruining your plan, isn't it?" Orson asked calmly. She froze for a moment, then continued as if nothing had happened. "The plan to save the company? Yes, it makes it difficult, but we can do it. We just need to—" "No, Paige," Orson interrupted her. "I'm talking about your real plan, the one you discussed on the phone today. The divestiture, the refocusing of the business, the old man who was smarter than the old man." Paige's face changed from tired to calculating and cold. "You've been eavesdropping on my conversations?" she asked icily. "I overheard it by accident, and I'm glad I did. Otherwise, I'd have remained ignorant of your true intentions." Paige walked slowly to the bar and poured herself a whiskey. "What do you think my true intentions are?" she asked with a slight chuckle. "To use me to gain control of the company, and then sell it off piece by piece, destroying what my grandfather had spent a lifetime building." Paige took a sip, looking at him over the glass. "What a dramatization, Orson. I just have a more modern view of business than your grandfather. Sometimes you have to get rid of outdated assets to move forward." "Who are you talking to?" Orson demanded, standing up. "Who is this man you've been planning all this with?" Paige's face hardened. "This is none of your business. This is my company, which you only got because of me," she suddenly shouted, losing control. "Do you think your grandfather would have ever let you take over if I hadn't insisted? If I hadn't pushed you to claim your right? You would have been forever in his shadow, running petty errands, waiting for approval." Orson took a step back, shocked by her fury. "Is that what it all meant to you? Power? Control? What else?" She laughed bitterly. "Love? Did you really think a woman like me could fall in love with someone like you? A shy, insecure boy living in the shadow of his great-grandfather?" Her words hit Orson like a slap in the face. He turned pale, but his voice remained firm. "If that's how you feel, we have nothing more to discuss. I want you to leave. Tonight." Paige set the glass on the table with such force that it nearly shattered. "You're kicking me out? Me? After everything I've done for you. For us." "You've done nothing for us," Orson said quietly, "because there never was an us. There was only your plan." She gave him a long look, then shook her head. "You're going to regret this, Orson. You're nothing without me. You can't save the company or get your grandfather back." "Maybe," he said, "but at least I'll have an honest life." Paige laughed, a cold, unpleasant laugh. "Honesty? In business? You're even more naive than I thought." She turned and left the room. An hour later, she left, taking only her personal belongings and papers. "That's how it ended," Orson said, finishing his story. "The next day I learned that she had met with representatives of Global Tech, a conglomerate known for buying up companies, crushing them, and selling them off piecemeal. I listened to his story with growing understanding. Everything was coming together. Paige's ambition, her insistence on gaining control, her plans for rapid change. "So now what?" I asked. "What do you want, Orson?" He looked me straight in the eye, and I saw a determination in his gaze that I hadn't seen before. "I want to right my wrongs, grandfather. Save the company if it's not too late. I want to apologize to you. For everything." I was silent, pondering his words. Did I believe him? Yes, I did. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, hear it in his voice. He'd had an epiphany, seeing Paige for who she was. The question was what I wanted to do next. "I had a meeting yesterday," I said finally, "with Lawrence Eddington from Precision Instruments. He offered me a job, a good job, with influence and prospects." Orson turned even paler. Did you take it?" Not yet. I'm thinking about it." "Grandfather, please." He leaned forward. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your help, but the company, the people who work there, it's not their fault. If you go to a competitor, it'll be the end of Hatton Labs." I knew he was right, and yet a part of me doubted. Was I ready to come back, to take on the responsibility again? At my age? And could I really forgive Orson for letting Paige kick me out of my own home? I need time to think, I said. It's not an easy decision. Orson nodded, realizing he couldn't ask for more. Of course, grandfather. I'll wait for your decision, whatever it may be. When he left, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about my future, the future of the company and our family. Eddington's offer was tempting, a fresh start, a chance to prove that I still meant something in this industry. But it would also mean a definitive break with the past, with what I had spent a lifetime building. On the other hand, returning to Hatton Labs meant diving back into the problems I had hoped to leave behind, to carry the burden of responsibility again when I could have been enjoying some peace. By evening, I had made my decision, called Eddington, thanked him briefly for the offer, and declined, then dialed Orson's number. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I said, at Hatton Labs headquarters. Gather the board of directors and key department heads. We'll talk about the future of the company. Thank you, Grandpa. I could hear the relief in his voice. Yeah, we won't let you down again. I haven't responded to that promise. Time would tell if he would keep it. But one thing I knew for sure, whatever my role in the future of Hatton Labs, I couldn't let it die. Too much labor, too much hope had been put into this company. Too many people depended on it. In the evening, I sat on the terrace of Rupert's house, looking up at the stars and thinking of Octavia. She would approve of my decision, I was sure. She'd always said that forgiveness didn't mean oblivion, but that it gave a chance for a new beginning. And maybe that new beginning was exactly what me, Orson, and Hatton Labs needed. Not running to competitors, not harboring grudges, but honestly admitting mistakes and moving forward. With that thought in mind, I went to bed, preparing for tomorrow, which would determine the future of everything I valued in this life. In the morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. Yesterday's conversation with Orson had left a heavy residue in my soul. Despite his remorse, I couldn't forget his weakness, his inability to protect me from Paige. Some betrayals are too deep to simply forgive and forget. I stared at the phone for a long moment, at Eddington's business card lying on the bedside table. Then I dialed the number with determination. Mr. Eddington, this is Ambrose Hatton. I've considered your offer, and I'm prepared to accept it, subject to certain conditions. An hour later, we met at his temporary office in downtown South Charleston. Eddington looked pleased, but tried to contain his enthusiasm as we discussed the details. I want complete autonomy in choosing projects, I said. No coercion to take action against former colleagues or clients. I'll work for the benefit of Precision Instruments, but on my terms. Of course, Eddington nodded. Your experience and reputation are exactly what we're interested in. We don't expect you to act against your principles. Nah, sir, one more thing, I looked him straight in the eye. No public announcements about me joining you for a month. I want to settle some personal matters first. Eddington hesitated for a moment, then agreed. All right, but in 1 month we will announce you're joining the team with all the publicity we can muster. We shook hands, finalizing the deal. A strange feeling swept over me, a mixture of release and regret, as if I was simultaneously dropping a heavy burden and betraying something deeply personal. But the decision had been made, and I wasn't about to back down. At 11 o'clock, my phone started ringing off the hook. First Orson, then Rupert, then several members of the Hatton Labs board of directors. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I wrote a short message to Rupert, explaining my decision and asking for understanding. He was the only one who deserved an explanation. The following days passed in a whirlwind of meetings and introductions with the Precision Instruments team. Eddington wasted no time introducing me to key employees, involving me in ongoing projects. The company was smaller than Hatton Labs but was growing rapidly, with a modern approach to management and innovation. Your experience will be invaluable to us, Eddington said, showing me around the new lab, especially in the development of the high-precision spectrometer line, where Hatton Labs has always been a leader. I nodded, trying to concentrate on the technical details and not think about the fact that I was essentially helping my former company's competitors. But was it still mine? After everything that had happened, news of the crisis at Hatton Labs continued to fill the business press. Stocks were plummeting, customers were leaving, key employees were submitting resignations. The board of directors was holding emergency meetings, trying to find a way out. Orson, according to insiders, was working around the clock trying to keep the company afloat. One evening, on my way home from work to a new apartment I rented in an upscale neighborhood in the city, I saw him waiting at the front door. He looked haggard, gaunt, with deep shadows under his eyes. "Grandpa," he said, taking a step toward me, "please listen to me. It's only 5 minutes." I could have walked past him, ignored him like I'd been ignoring him all this time, but something in his gaze, desperation mixed with determination, made me stop. "5 minutes," I said, opening the door to the entryway. We went up to the apartment in silence. The spacious, minimalist living room, still uncluttered and devoid of personal belongings, looked more like a hotel room than a home. I gestured for Orson to sit down. "I heard you were working with Eddington," he began without preamble. "Arum, at Precision Instruments. News travels fast," I remarked neutrally. "Why, grandfather?" I could hear the pain in his voice. "Why did you choose them over us? I thought, after our conversation, I hoped you'd come back." I stared at him for a long moment, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes bridges are burned too thoroughly to be rebuilt," I said finally. "You made your choice when you let Paige kick me out of my own house. I made mine when I decided to start over. I made a mistake," his voice shook. "A terrible mistake. But I'm trying to fix it. The company's on the verge of bankruptcy, Grandpa. People are losing their jobs. Everything you've been building for half a century. A company is just a building. Contracts, equipment," I interrupted him, echoing what Paige had once said. "It can be rebuilt, recreated. A family, that's different." Orson lowered his head, and I saw his shoulders shake. He was crying for the first time in my memory since he was a child. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay. But the other part, the harsher part, reminded me of the betrayal, of how easily he'd succumbed to Paige's influence. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said, standing up. "I have work to do." He lifted his head, wiping away his tears. "What? You're really not coming back? Not even for the people who have worked with you for years? For the legacy you've created?" "I have a new legacy now," I replied. "A new chapter of life, and you should find yours." He stood up, straightened, trying to maintain his dignity. "I'm not giving up," he said quietly. "Not with the company, not with you. I will prove myself worthy of your trust, even if it takes years." I didn't answer. I walked him to the door, and when it closed behind him, I felt a strange emptiness inside. Not regret, not anger, just emptiness. The next weeks were intense. I immersed myself in Precision Instruments projects, utilizing all my experience and connections. Eddington didn't hide his satisfaction. My presence was already starting to yield results. Several key clients who had previously worked with Hatton Labs had switched to us after meeting with me in person. "You are exceeding our expectations, Ambrose," Eddington said after a particularly successful negotiation with a major pharmaceutical company. "With you, we can become market leaders much faster than we plan." I smiled, accepting the compliment, but somewhere deep inside I felt a strange confusion. Every contract I'd helped Precision Instruments win had been a blow to Hatton Labs, to the people who worked there, to the legacy I'd spent a lifetime building. A month later, as agreed, Precision Instruments officially announced that I was joining the team. A press release was distributed to all business publications, with interviews scheduled in the coming weeks. The market reaction was immediate. The company's stock rose 20% in one day. That same evening, I received a call from Rupert. "Are you sure you're making the right choice, Ambrose?" he asked without preamble. "Hatton Labs is on the verge of closing. 400 people could be out of work." "Business is business," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Companies come and go." "That's not you talking," Rupert said bitterly. "Shamor, it's your resentment talking." Ambrose, whom I've known for half a century, would never abandon the people who counted on him. I couldn't sleep for a long time after that conversation, pondering my decisions, the path I had chosen. Was I right to punish the whole company for Orson and Page's mistakes? Or was Rupert right, and was I driven only by resentment? The next morning I saw Paige, by chance, in a cafe near the office. She was sitting alone looking at something on her tablet, looking much less groomed than usual. I could have left discreetly, but instead I approached her table. "Ambrose," she flinched when she saw me. "What a surprise. May I sit down?" I asked, and she nodded, quickly closing the clipboard. We were silent for a few seconds, studying each other. I heard you're not with Orson anymore, I said finally. News travels fast in a small town, she replied, echoing my recent phrase. Especially news like this. They say even your parents turned their backs on you when they heard about your plans for the company. She paled slightly but kept her composure. My parents were always too conservative. Didn't understand modern business. Or basic decency, I added. Paige looked at me with unexpected candor. You know what your problem is, Ambrose? You think the world is divided into good people and bad people. People who do the right thing and people who do the wrong thing. But in reality, it's much more complicated than that. Enlighten me, I offered with a touch of irony. Ifar, there is no room for sentimentality or personal attachments in business, she said, leaning forward. There are only strategies that work or don't work. I saw the potential of Hatton Labs and a plan to realize it. A plan that could benefit everyone. Investors, employees, even you. By kicking me out of my own home? It was a mistake, she admitted abruptly. A tactical mistake. I underestimated your influence and your, vindictiveness. I shook my head, marveling at her ability to still see the situation solely in terms of gain and loss. What are you going to do now? I asked, genuinely interested. Leave South Charleston, she answered without hesitation. Shawam, there are no more opportunities for me here. Too many bridges have been burned. But it's a big world, and there are plenty of companies in need of executives with my vision. And not an ounce of remorse, I remarked. Shorty, remorse is a luxury for those who can afford to look back. She stood up, gathering her things. I always have only the future. She walked away, leaving me to reflect on our conversation. She was right about something. The world isn't clearly divided into black and white, and there really isn't much room for sentimentality in business. But without humanity, without basic values, without fidelity to principles, what is left? Only the endless pursuit of profit and power, devoid of meaning and satisfaction. That evening, I received a message from Rupert, brief but shocking. The Hatton Labs Board of Directors has voted to sell the company to the global tech conglomerate. The official announcement is tomorrow. Global Tech is the same company that Orson said Page was negotiating with, known for its strategy of splitting acquired businesses and selling off assets piecemeal. The end of Hatton Labs as a whole. The end of the legacy I'd spent a lifetime building. I stayed up all night reflecting on my journey, on the decisions that led to this point, about the people who believed me, worked with me, built the company with me, about what real leadership and real responsibility means. In the morning, I called Eddington and asked for an urgent meeting. He looked puzzled when I walked into his office. Ambrose, what's wrong? You look worried. Lawrence, I have a favor to ask. A big favor. I outlined my plan. Crazy, risky, almost impossible. But the only one that could save Hatton Labs and the people who work there. Do you realize what you're asking? Eddington shook his head. It's a huge amount of money, a huge risk. The board of directors would never approve such a thing. Then don't ask them, I said. At least not yet. Use your personal connections, I'll use mine. If it works, everybody wins. If it doesn't, I'll take full responsibility. Eddington looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Sakuritum, all right, Ambrose, I'll help. Not because I believe in this plan, but because I believe in you. The next 48 hours passed in feverish activity. Calls, meetings, negotiations. I contacted Victor Killian, Harrison Kingsley, other investors and partners. Eddington activated his connections in the financial world. Together, we created an alternative proposal for Hatton Labs, a joint acquisition of the company by a consortium of investors, with its integrity and most of its jobs intact. I personally called every board member, persuading them to postpone the decision to sell Global Tech for 72 hours. Some resisted, some hesitated, but eventually all agreed to give us a chance. On the third day, we presented our proposal to the board, specific, detailed, with guaranteed funding, higher than the Global Tech proposal and with better terms for employees and customers. Orson attended the meeting, sitting quietly in the corner, watching in amazement as his grandfather and the head of a rival company worked together to save Hatton Labs. After the vote unanimously accepting our proposal, he approached me. Why? He asked quietly. After everything that's happened, Why did you do it? I looked at him for a long moment. Not for you, I said honestly. Not even for the company itself. For the people who were counting on me. For the principles I taught you, but which I stopped following because of resentment and pride. I don't know how to thank you, his voice trembled. Don't thank me, I replied. Just learn, from my mistakes, from your own. And remember that business is not just numbers and contracts. It's first and foremost about people and the relationships between them. That evening, I wrote a letter to the board of directors of Precision Instruments explaining my decision to leave the company. Eddington was not surprised. I knew this would happen when I agreed to help, he said with a slight smile. But I have no regrets. It was a valuable experience working with an industry legend. I didn't return to Hatton Labs as an executive. Instead, I took a seat on a new advisory board, created as part of the restructuring. My role was more of a symbolic one, a wise elder to turn to in difficult situations. That suited me just fine. At 74, I no longer wanted the day-to-day operational work. Orson remained CEO, but now under the oversight of the board and with more realistic expectations. I could see him changing, becoming more mature, more responsible. Our relationship was slowly rebuilding, though full trust may never return. Paige did leave South Charleston as promised. The last I heard of her, she had accepted a position with an investment firm in New York City. Her parents, respected members of our small community, still avoided mentioning her name, ashamed of the scandal and her role in it. I didn't move back into my old house. Instead, I bought a small but cozy cottage on the outskirts of town, overlooking the mountains. There, in peace and quiet, I began a new chapter of my life. One day, while browsing the local newspaper, I came across an ad for a mentoring program for young entrepreneurs. Something about it hooked me. The next day, I called the organizers and offered my services as a mentor. Thus began my new mission, to share my experience, to warn against mistakes I had made myself, to teach not only business, but also humanity in business. I met with young people full of energy and ideas, but often naive in their understanding of the real world. I told them about Hatton Labs, about ups and downs, about betrayals and loyalty, about the importance of choosing the right people and trusting your intuition. One of my first mentees was a young engineer with an idea for a new type of medical device. Talented but shy, he reminded me of my younger self. I helped him develop a business plan, introduced him to potential investors, and taught him how to protect his ideas and interests. The most important thing, I told him during one of our meetings, is not to lose yourself in the pursuit of success. Money, power, recognition. All these things come and go. What remains is who you have become along the way and the people you have helped to make better. He nodded, writing down my words as he always did. And I looked at him and thought about my life's journey, the mistakes and victories, the losses and gains. That in the end, it's not companies and contracts that matter, but relationships and principles. About how it's never too late to start over, even at 74. And though the wound of betrayal still hurt, I was finally beginning to find peace. Not in revenge, not in success, but in passing on what I know and value to the next generation, in the hope that they won't repeat my mistakes, in the certainty that my true legacy was not in buildings and bank accounts, but in the lives I had made a difference.